Westminster, October 1396, the year of the third indiction, the 29th of King Richard II's troubled reign. I am Brother Matthew of Westminster, Benedictine priest, sacristan of the Royal Chapel, and now unwilling chronicler of the strangest marriage Christendom has witnessed since the days of Clovis. The air is raw with river mist. The torches along the nave gutter in draughts that sweep beneath the great west doors. Outside, London stirs like an anthill kicked by a giant. Inside, the abbey is a hive of silk and steel. Aldermen in scarlet, knights in half-armour, bishops like gilded swans, their vestments stiff with bullion. Every taper is scented with frankincense and fear, for we are to crown a child. The bride has come from France in a flotilla of white-hulled ships, her sails painted with the golden lilies of Valois. She is 6 years and 11 months old, weighs perhaps 4 stone wet, and stands no higher than the pommel of a knight's sword. Her name is Isabella of Valois, eldest living daughter of King Charles the Mad. She has already survived her father's ravings, he who believes his bones are glass and his blood quicksilver, and her mother's cold ambition, the beautiful Isabeau of Bavaria, who bartered a daughter for 28 years of truce and 800,000 francs. Tonight, the child will be made Queen of England, and the kingdom will bow to her as though she were another virgin enthroned in the chancel window. I see her first when the doors are flung wide and the procession advances beneath the rood screen. Torchlight slides over her face, oval, olive-skinned, eyes large as hazelnuts and just as dark. Her veil is of silk from Damascus, so fine it floats like cobweb. Her gown is cloth of gold thick as armor. A circlet of sapphires has been fastened round her brow to keep the veil from slipping, sapphires too heavy for the small neck beneath. 2 earls carry her train. 2 duchesses hold her hands, for she cannot walk the length of the nave alone without stumbling. Yet she does not stumble. She steps with the measured gravity of a cathedral canon, her gaze moving from the vaulted roof to the painted saints to the staring crowd, as though she were memorizing every beam and banner, engraving Westminster upon her heart. Behind her walks King Richard, 29 years of age, golden-haired, long-limbed, dressed in a robe of crimson velvet sewn with pearls and rubies. His face is pale, almost translucent. His eyes, usually fierce with Plantagenet pride, are soft tonight, soft as candle wax. He has grieved a year for Anne of Bohemia, the gentle queen who died of plague in the spring of '94. Some say he loved her as a man loves his own soul, others that she was the only creature who could charm the black melancholy that sometimes grips him. Her death left the succession empty, the nobles restless, and France eager to buy peace with a child. Now Richard stretches out his gloved hand to the tiny princess, and the contrast is so stark that a gasp ripples through the nave. The tall king and the pocket-sized bride, the man who has ruled since boyhood, and the girl who has scarcely learned to rule her own tears. I am stationed at the foot of the altar steps, the chrismatory ready, the missal open to the nuptial mass. My duty is to bless the ring, to bind the hands, to pronounce the words that will make them one flesh. My heart beats like a drum. I have bound the hands of duchesses and countesses, of widows and of virgins barely nubile, but never of a child in leading strings. The Archbishop of Canterbury, William Courtenay, stands above me, mitre sparkling with diamonds, crozier in hand. His face is carved from stone, only the twitch of a muscle near his eye betrays unease. When the couple kneels, the child must be lifted onto a cushion so that the Archbishop can reach her head. Richard kneels first, then draws her gently forward. His hand swallows her wrist as a hawk's claw might cradle a sparrow. The cushion is of purple silk, embroidered with the leopards of England and the lilies of France entwined, a symbol of the peace this marriage is meant to seal. The vows are spoken. Richard's voice is low and steady. I, Richard, take thee, Isabella. The child answers in French, clear as a chapel bell. J. Isabella, prantor. Richard, her accent is Parisian, lilting, the vowels round as apples. She stumbles only once, on the word endure, then writes herself. I see the Archbishop's hands tremble as he places the ring, a plain gold band, for a child needs no gems, upon her thumb, then her forefinger, then her third finger, where it will stay. It is loose. The clerk has bound a twist of silk beneath, to keep it from slipping. I bind their hands with the nuptial cord, scarlet silk for England, white for France, and the knot is so small it seems almost invisible against the king's broad wrist. Yet the knot is tied, the law is satisfied, they are husband and wife. The choir bursts into the Te Deum, the organ roars like a wounded lion, the nobles cheer till the rafters shake. Outside the abbey doors the bells of London ring in wild discord, St. Paul's deep bass, St. Martin's shrill treble, and from the tower the solemn iron voice that has tolled for coronations and funerals alike. The child queen is lifted to her feet. For a moment she sways. Richard steadies her with a hand beneath her elbow. Then she raises her free hand, tiny white, the sapphire ring flashing, and the crowd hushes. She has learned already the silence of queens. A shower of rose petals falls from the clerestory. They drift like pink snow across her veil, cling to the gold embroidery, settle on the king's crimson sleeve. The moment freezes in my mind, the child bride, the grieving king, the petals like drops of blood upon the stone. The feast is held in Westminster Hall, the largest timber roof in Christendom, its beams like the ribs of a whale. 300 candles burn in iron cressets. The smoke rises in a blue cloud and escapes through louvres high above. The tables groan under peacocks dressed in their own feathers, swans roasted and gilded, venison pasties shaped like castles, subtleties of sugar and almond that mimic the abbey itself. The child sits at the high table on a throne of cushions, for her feet do not reach the floor. Before her is set a golden cup shaped like a lily, the lip so wide she must use both hands to lift it. She drinks little. The wine is spiced and strong. Richard sits at her right hand, carving morsels of capon small enough for her to manage. He smiles often, but the smile does not reach his eyes. I stand behind his chair, ready to pour or to bless, and I watch them. They speak in whispers, French and English mingling. Mamie, sweetheart, regardes le jongleur. Her laughter is light, bird-like, but when the minstrels strike up a dance, she folds her hands in her lap and watches gravely. She is too small to dance, and she knows it. Between courses, the Duke of Gloucester rises to toast the bride. He is the king's uncle, hawk-faced, silver-haired, his voice like a trumpet. He speaks of peace between England and France, of the end of the long war that has bled both kingdoms white. He speaks of the dowry, 800,000 francs, that will refill England's coffers. He speaks of the child as a lily transplanted from French soil to bloom in English gardens. The words are fair, but beneath them runs a current of calculation. I see the child's eyes flicker to Richard's face. She has heard the same tone in her mother's voice, the same weighing of worth. She bows her head, the picture of dutiful modesty, but I catch the tightening of her small mouth. She is not deceived. The evening wanes. The torches burn lower. The shadows lengthen. At last the king rises and lifts the child queen in his arms. She is feather light, and carries her through the hall, while the nobles cheer and the minstrels play. They pass beneath the great screen of carved oak, past the shields of departed kings, and vanish into the royal apartments. The doors close behind them. The feast dissolves into gossip and drunken song, but I remain staring at the empty throne, the scattered petals, the half-eaten subtleties. I think of the morrow and the morrow after, and the years that must pass before this marriage can be anything but a promise deferred. The days that follow are a blur of ceremony and instruction. The child is assigned a household befitting a queen: chamberlains, stewards, carvers, cupbearers, tirewomen, laundresses, grooms of the chamber, grooms of the stable. She has her own chapel, her own almoner, her own fool, a gap-toothed boy named Wat, who can juggle knives and quote Latin tags. She learns to sit still while the dressmakers pin and tuck, to walk with a book on her head, to greet ambassadors with the proper degree of condescension. Her mornings are spent with tutors. Master William, a grey-haired clerk from Oxford, teaches her to read Latin and to write a fair hand. Dame Alice, a widow of the Queen Mother's household, instructs her in embroidery and the management of estates. Sir Robert, a grizzled knight, drills her in the genealogies of Europe, so that she may not mistake a duke for a count. She learns quickly, eagerly, but sometimes her attention wanders. I find her once in the palace garden, kneeling beside a bed of columbines, talking to a snail as though it were a confidant. She misses her mother. She writes letters in careful French, sealing them with wax and the little dolphin seal Richard gave her. The replies are slow to come and colder. The Queen of France is busy with her husband's madness and her own intrigues. Isabella learns to hide the hurt behind a smile. She turns to Richard for affection, and he gives it unstintingly. He sits with her in the evenings, reading aloud from Chronicles of Arthur and Charlemagne. He teaches her to play chess, letting her win at first, then gradually revealing the deeper strategies. He shows her the palace menagerie, the lions and leopards, the white hart that is said to have come from the King of Norway. She names the hart Perseverance and feeds it apples from her own hand. Yet the court is not kind. The lords who praised her beauty now sneer at her height. The ladies who curtsied to her train now whisper that she will never bear an heir. The common people who cheered her coronation grow restless. They see the king's favourites enriched, the taxes rising, the harvest failing. They remember the old Queen Anne, beloved for her charities, and they compare the golden child unfavourably. Isabella hears the murmurs. She has learned to listen. One afternoon she finds a crudely drawn effigy in the gutter outside the palace gates, a straw doll in a paper crown, with pins stuck through its heart. She says nothing, but that night she asks me to teach her the psalm choir habitat in Adjutorio Altissimi. She learns it by heart. The years pass. She is 11, 12. Her body begins to change. The childish roundness thins, the features sharpen. She is still small, but there is a grace about her now, a dignity that silences the mockers. She rides well, speaks 3 languages fluently, can quote Ovid and the Romance of the Rose. She has her own seal, her own household accounts, her own petitioners. She dispenses alms with a judicious hand. The poor call her the Little Mother, yet she is lonely. The girls of her own age are intimidated by her rank. The women treat her as an oddity. Only Richard remains constant. He calls her Ma Petite Reine and gives her jewels from the treasury, a brooch shaped like a falcon, a girdle of pearls, a ruby the size of a dove's heart. She wears them with a queen's composure, but at night she lays them aside and reads the Book of Ruth by candlelight, whispering the words, "Whither thou goest, I will go." The storm breaks in the autumn of 1399. Richard returns from Ireland to find Henry of Bolingbroke landed in Yorkshire, the nobles flocking to his banner. The king rides north, leaving Isabella at Windsor. She stands on the battlements watching the road until the dust of the last horseman vanishes. A week later the news comes. Richard has surrendered at Flint Castle. The next courier brings word that he has abdicated. The child queen is summoned to London. She goes in a closed litter, her ladies weeping, the streets silent. At the Tower she is greeted not by Richard but by Henry, stern and courteous. He bows too low and calls her sister. She answers in a voice that does not tremble. "I was a queen when you were a subject." He winces. She sees it and is satisfied. She is kept in honorable custody, but custody nonetheless. The apartments are comfortable, the food rich, the guards respectful, yet the bars are real, the keys turn twice at night. Rumors swirl. Richard is dead. Richard is alive. Richard is to be freed. Richard is to be tried. Isabella hears them all and says nothing. She writes letters in French and English, sealed with the dolphin. They go unanswered. She prays, fasts, embroiders a shroud for the squirrel that died. She grows thinner, paler, but her eyes burn with a steady flame. One night she calls me to her chamber and asks for the Psalm de Profundis. I recite it. She joins in, her child's voice clear and sure. When I finish, she says, I will not weep. Queens do not weep for fallen kings, but her hand clutches the reliquary until the knuckles show white. At last the decision is made. Henry will not risk war with France. Isabella is to be returned to her father. The treaty is signed in the chapter house. She will renounce all claim to the English crown, and Henry will pay her dowry in installments. The child listens to the terms without a word, then signs her name, Isabella Regina, in a hand still round with youth. The day appointed for her departure is grey and cold. She rides through London streets lined with silent crowds. Some weep, some curse. Most watch with the blank curiosity reserved for accidents. At the dock she pauses, turns to the tower, and makes a sign of the cross. She does not look back. They say the crossing was smooth, but she was seasick every league. At Calais the French lords meet her with trumpets and banners, yet she greets them gravely, like a sovereign returning from exile. At Paris her mother kisses her once, then turns to discuss the dowry. The mad king does not know her. He asks if she is from Navarre. She kneels, kisses his hand and withdraws. That night she writes to me, I am home, yet home is strange. The lilies bloom, but the leopards hunt in my dreams. She encloses a pressed columbine from the palace garden. I keep it still. The years that follow are a chronicle of adjustment and reinvention. She is 12, 13, 14. Her French accent returns, her English fades. She learns to ride pillion behind a knight, to dance the carol, to preside over a ducal court. Her mother plans a new marriage, this time to a cousin, Charles of Orléans, who is young and gallant and has never worn a crown. Isabella consents with the same grave courtesy she once showed Richard. The wedding is held at Notre Dame. The bells ring until the pigeons wheel above the towers like blown petals. She wears white silk and a circlet of pearls, and if she thinks of another wedding, another crown, she does not say. She is 15 when she becomes Duchess of Orléans, 16 when her first child is born, a daughter, Jeanne, with her mother's dark eyes and her father's stubborn chin. She mothers her children with fierce tenderness, determined that they shall never know the loneliness of courts. She establishes a scriptorium, patronizes poets, corresponds with Christine de Pizan. She teaches Jeanne to read Latin and to embroider the Marguerite border she once worked for Westminster. When war breaks out between Armagnac and Burgundy, she rides beside her husband, not as ornament, but as counselor. The soldiers call her La Petite Reine still, though she is no longer little. Her letters to me, when they come, speak of harvests and childbirth, of plague and politics, but never of England. Once she writes, I have learned to live between two loyalties, as a bird between two skies. I understand she will not return. Yet England does not forget. When Henry I grows sick and his son seeks French alliance, envoys come to court her daughter. Isabella receives them in a chamber hung with arras, showing the siege of Troy. Irony not lost on any present. She answers with diplomacy, courtesy, and the ghost of a smile. She is 20 when her third child is born, 21 when the wasting sickness takes her. She dies in September, the month of harvest and of parting. They say she asked to be buried in the Celestine habit, and that her last words were in English, perseverance. Over her tomb they set a simple slab, Isabel Jadis Reine d'Angleterre, once queen, always queen. I, old now and near my own ending, walk sometimes in the cloister when the moon rides high and the rooks are still. I hear her voice in the rustle of the ivy on the wall. Father, pray that I may forgive this kingdom. I do pray, not for England, which has forgotten her, but for the child who once stood upon the altar steps and looked out at a world too large and too cruel. May God grant her the peace that earth denied, and may the angels sing her the lullabies that kings and conquerors could not. Here ends the chronicle of Brother Matthew, who saw what he saw and speaks no more.